Hello everybody and welcome back to my invasion tutorial part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, click the radar at the bottom left there and it'll bring you to the first part of the tutorial. So now we've talked about already how to set up territory, assault, and capture the flag. So we got the 3 phases. Now we need to set up respawn points and starting points. Now this is a little bit more complicated than setting up the areas, and the reason why is because there's a lot more you can do with setting up spawn points. Now obviously, like I said, you don't use the respawn points at all, period, but you do use initiation points only during one phase, and that's the first phase at the very start of the game. Now when I set up my games, I will go by phase. So I build my map, and after my map is finished, I go through it step by step. And this is what I do. First step, started the game. Let's pretend I didn't make those territories. I make the starting point for the red and blue team. Now, the red team is Spartans. Oops, come on, there we go. Red team is Spartans, blue team is elite. That's what it's always going to be. Doesn't matter what else you set the game up to be, how you have attacking. Blue is always elite and red is always Spartan. So you gotta remember that. Now, by default, Spartan is always defending and the elite is always the attackers. This is the default setting for the game. You can change this in your game option if you make a custom game of invasion. You can set it so that the elites are defending and the Spartans are attacking. It all depends on what you want as your preference. But just remember, by default, that's what it's going to be. Elites are attacking the Spartans. So I usually start by one color, whichever one I'm closest to at the time. So let's go ahead and put 2 starting points for the elites. This is actually going to be a game where there is 4 versus 4. Let's just say that for simplicity's sake. So I set up my 4 starting points for my elites. Now we need a place for them to respawn, because elites obviously are not invincible, so they're going to die. Now this is where things get not tricky, but can get complicated. It's something that you got to remember. Like I said, you don't use spawn points. What you do use, or respawn points, what you do use is territories, like the hill markers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up 2 different kinds at the beginning of this game, just to show you the 2 different kinds of spawn points. There's one there, and there's one over here. Now, what you need to do to make this a respawn point is decide what you want to do with it. There's 2 things you can do, like I'm setting up here. One is you can have it where this respawn point is there throughout the whole game. Every single round, the elites can spawn here, which is usually a good thing you want to do if you're setting up a map, is make it so that the first spawn point area that they start off at, they can always choose that. Just in case they get bottlenecked inside the base, they can still spawn outside the base if they want to. Usually that means they have to travel a lot longer, but it does mean that they can get in a much more safer area if they have to. So that's a good idea, depending on what kind of map you have, of course. The other choice is making it so that they can respawn here for the first phase, but when the first phase is done, they cannot spawn here anymore. I'm going to go through the simpler of the 2 first. So that is always here. Now you go under advance and you make this, actually it's quicker going the other direction, invasion res zone. Now obviously invasion is invasion, res means respawn, and zone means that it's there throughout the whole game. You don't need to set up the spawn sequence or anything, just ignore that. The only thing you need to do is set up this and make sure it's for the blue team. If you don't set up a team, it's not really going to work the way you want it to, so make sure it's the team that you want. Also, another thing you need to be aware, at the bottom of this arrow you see a kind of like a respawn point. Whatever that is facing, that's their default orientation. So if I die and I don't move my controller or anything, I'm going to respawn facing this way. You usually want to respawn facing the direction of the battle. So turn it so that it's facing the direction of the battle, and that way you'll respawn here. Now you don't need to make this zone huge because you usually by default respawn right in the center here. The only reason why you have an area is, let's say I die and George dies and Fred dies, and we all are going to respawn at the same place at the same time. The area allows us to spawn at the same place but not on top of each other. So I might spawn here, Freddy might spawn here, and George or whoever else I said, like I said, it's 3 a.m. in the morning, so I'm not really thinking clearly, would spawn over here. That just gives us more area to spawn in. You do want to make sure that it's slightly out of the way so you don't get spawn killed, like put walls up, that kind of thing. You want to make it a safe spawn location. Now the other spawn point, the one that's only going to be this phase, there's a couple things we can do with it. So let's first just set it up so it works for everybody. Obviously we need it to be blue team. Go down here and you'll see these 3 items. There's res P1, res P2, and res P3. The P means phase. This is phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Seeing as we're setting up for phase 1, we go to res P1. Now spawn sequence, this is where it gets a little bit complicated. By default, if you want this to work for every squad, set it up to be 3. And what I mean squad is if you're playing a full game of, let's just get some more spawn people so that I can demonstrate this. If you're playing a full squad, or full game, I mean 16 versus 16, you got 8, you got actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so I guess that'd be 12 versus 12 would be a typical Halo Reach invasion game, like if you're playing matchmaking. They partner them up in groups of 2, so this would be squad 1, this would be squad 2, and this would be squad 3. So if you want this to work for all 3 squads, you set it up to be 3. If you want it to work for squad 1, it's 0, squad 2 it's 1, and squad 3 it's 2. Like I said, it's kind of confusing, but that's just something you gotta remember. If you want it to be for a specific squad, you set it up by number. If you want to make it easy on yourself, just set it up to 3 every time. That's what I do, because that means every single squad can spawn there. Alright, so I have a spawn point for the blue team for the beginning. You basically do the exact same thing for the red team. Now, I did want to point out that I have 2 points here at the first phase, that one and this one. When I die, that allows me to go up on the D-pad and choose which point I want to spawn at before the time goes. So like, let's say my squad member is alive, but he's kind of under fire. I hit up on the D-pad, I choose here, hit up on the D-pad again, and I choose here. So make sure you spread those out throughout the map and give people variety, especially for the defenders. If you want them to be able to defend their like castle, you want to make sure that they can spawn at various key points, but not right on top. So like, let's say there's the assault here, right? The assault plates. You don't want them spawning right next to it because that would make it way too hard for the elites. But you do want them to spawn close enough that they can get to it and defend their base without it being under attack. So keep those all in consideration when you do that. Now, I've already covered respawn points and the setting up the different phases. You are technically ready. You can go ahead and go off and do whatever you want, make your invasion map how you want to. Just remember those key factors. But I'm going to go ahead and do one more part part 3, or at least I'm hoping, cross my fingers, one more part, might be 2 more, on tips, tricks, and that kind of stuff. Some more information about invasion besides the very basics. So I shall see you all in part 3 of how to set up an invasion game type.